Hi, it's Shira Adler, and welcome back to another episode of The Synergy Show. I can't keep introducing people the same way, saying, I am so honored, I'm so joyful to introduce my next guest, but it's accurate. It really is my absolute joy and honor to be introducing these guests. I cannot believe that they say yes and are spending time with me and sharing their insight and their wisdom. But this is my passion and my purpose. So today, I am so excited to introduce a gentleman who truly is, I think, one of the, if not the gentleman most responsible for building the most amount of actual hempcrete homes, at least here in North Carolina. But truthfully, I've looked around and done my research, and I think we'd be hard pressed to find anyone who has as much building experience. And not really the building, but the design, the understanding of these regenerative materials, really deeply going between the aesthetic, the architectural aspects, the regenerative benefits for health and wellness. There's just no one like this guy, truthfully. So, without further ado, because I'll let him introduce himself and all the wonderful things he's done, Mr. Tim Callahan, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Shira. And that I appreciate the wonderful introduction. It feels a little over the top. I mean, there are lots of people in the country, that I have worked with along the way that are also very knowledgeable. And it's been, I think this whole adventure has really been a success of it all been a result of this collaborative work between all kinds of folks.
That's really in keeping with your personality style. For the 5 minutes that I've known you in person now, I have to say you are both humble and gracious. But it is true, at least here, because I'm new to North Carolina. When I ask around, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, this is the guy you want to talk to. And you're part of my new, as we say in my language, mishpacha. You're part of the family because I was introduced to you and one of your colleagues, April McGill, who we'll also be connecting with. So I would just like to know, where did you really begin? Where did hempcrete start for you, this journey? Why this
Um,
material?
okay, that's great. I mean, this journey for me started like way before I ever heard of hempcrete because I have my history has mostly been in design build, for my entire career, which is going on like it's going into its like 60th, sixth decade or something ridiculous like that. Um, but I guess, so I don't want to go all the way back, but sometime in the 80s and 90s, I was involved in the boating industry. And
Mm.
I worked with a custom boat builder as a designer and architect, yacht, naval architect, and the chemicals that were used there were extremely bad for my health, and it led me to have to leave that industry. That then led me to think about like just toxins and non-toxic approaches to building in general, and what the price that we pay for what we perceive as like perfection of finishes and things like that, and certain materials. Um, and so I transitioned into residential work, and I was really committed to like at that time, and this is like in the early 90s, I think mid 90s.
Hmm.
Uh, I was really just looking at, how can we build like the healthiest environments for ourselves. This also coincided with a presentation I attended by Steve Badanes at a solar energy conference in Cocoa Beach. And Steve Badanes is one of the Jersey Devils architects, and they did some really cool projects. But in his presentation, he was talking about just as contractors, builders, designers, architects, we have a responsibility when we're putting something on the ground, first of all, to make sure that it's going to endure, because the whole notion of sustainability has to do, like, the component of that is how long is it going to last. If we have to replace a building every 50 years or every 100 years, that skews the equation.
That's actually, if I might, I've never heard someone express it that way, and I'm really glad that you did. I also love that, and I look for every guest often says a line that becomes a bumper sticker in my mind right away, and you offered it in the first 2 minutes. The price paid for perceived perfection. I
Yeah.
love that. And you're right, sustainability is not just about, I think you really, really hit something on the nose there. It's about how often do you have to replace it? How long will it last before you have to then engage with the reuse of these materials? Brilliant. I've never heard it spoken that way. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there are certain things that it's fine if they don't last, but understanding kind of
Mhm.
all the things that go into it and where, where's that tipping point? Birds' nests is great that they don't last. They're designed
Yeah.
to sort of be recycled every couple of years or whatever it takes, depending on the species.
Mhm.
But just something that I think about.
Wow, that was, yeah, really well put. Because I also think that architects in general, they often focus on the aesthetics, right? That's a primary driving point for the projects that they begin. But your work kind of intersects between material science, environmental impact, and the human experience. So which of those is most significant, or are they measured and balanced in every project that you undertake?
Well, I think every project is about finding the way through all of those considerations
Mhm.
and in whatever balance is appropriate for what, the project's goals. I mean, to me, long-term sustainability is about embodied carbon, built, operational carbon. How much work does it take? How long is it going to last? I'm jumping around a little bit here, but to go back to the thing about aesthetics and building science and things, I think that aesthetics are important because if buildings, speak to us, if it's a space that, has an aesthetic that warms our hearts, it nourishes us, we're going to take better care of that building, because it's like a reciprocal relationship. If we've created a jarring environment, no matter how luscious, it might be on a technical level or a building science level, it's probably not going to receive the same kind of attention. So I do think aesthetics matter just for our psyche, and sometimes that environment that we spend so much time in. On the building science side, I think that is this is where I often think that that's the really fun part to work on and comprehend because it's buildings are dynamic. I think most people that don't deal with buildings, it's a static thing. It sits there, right? It's walls and rocks and wood and things, and it sits there, but they're constantly in flux. The energy things that are going on, not to mention the physics of, wind and rain and all that. But there's an energy flux that goes on between all the components. And vapor and all that stuff, which we'll get into
Right,
around Hempcrete, of course.
right.
But I think I really perceive buildings to be sort of a composition. And if you want to use music as an analogy,
Mhm.
it's getting, it's like you have all these different parts in the orchestra, all these different parts in the building, and they have to play together harmoniously for the building to function, in a healthy and sustainable fashion. So that particular analogy is helpful to me because often folks that are just getting into this think that, if I do this one thing or this thing and that thing, somehow the building is going to be perfect or it's going to be great. And but it's more complex than that. So getting all those parts to play together well is always sort of the goal, really.
I love that. And I love the fact that you mentioned music because I just discovered that about you, that you're actually a musician, as am I. So my 2 degrees, a bachelor's in music and voice, and my
Really.
MFA. So yeah. So I love that. So let's go into music terminology then. The motif. Let's say there's a motif in this beautiful tapestry or symphony that you're putting together when you're observing a project. I think of hemp lime construction then is a through line. It's a motif that might play through all of your buildings or all of your structures or this for the symphony of the and the concretization of hempcrete, for example. So, okay, that's a real serious play on words. But how is that fundamentally different to you than conventional building materials and how significant?
Well, it's fundamentally different because it is much more dynamic than typical building materials. I mean, since it essentially serves as insulation, it not being structural,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
technically not structural. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But
Yes, yes.
it provides insulation. It provides a certain amount of thermal mass, and that how that functions is an interesting discussion. But I think for me, the biggest difference is its ability to take on and release water vapor. Its hygroscopic capabilities, and then which mitigates vapor and provides kind of like a flywheel for humidity in a building, and
Oh,
it you
that's a
know
great picture. Thank you for that because some of these phrases I've heard, but I like that a flywheel for the humidity in the building. That really makes sense on a pictorial level. I think because when you're dressing and you're describing hempcrete, and we've had these conversations. Some of my colleagues were talking thermal performance and fire safety, huge, huge, huge to
yeah,
me.
yeah,
Mold resistance, acoustics,
yeah,
right? Being a
yeah,
musician, and carbon
all that.
sequestration. But you're talking about the vapor permeability and humidity. So yeah, please continue on that because I think
Well,
that's
just
important.
yeah, the vapor permeability is, as far as it's mitigating moisture within the home. I mean, everything has a limit, but it really does function in that way as part of its um,
Mm.
just its inherent properties because of the lime that's in it. Essentially, I mean, really, and and you mentioned mold resistance and sound; those also come into play a lot. I think the sound thing is definitely noticeable, even with a plastered finish, which is kind of surprising to me. But the sound reduction coefficient is very high.
Really?
Oh
I,
yeah, yeah,
I didn't
uh,
know that.
yeah. And I've spoken with people. I mean, I've thought this, and I think there are some folks out there right now that are making panels to be used in sound studios because
Amazing. That's where my
yeah,
brain went right away because I'm
yeah,
actually
yeah.
speaking. I'm doing a lecture this week for, believe it or not, the theater students, the
Mhm.
performance majors at High Point University. And I'm very excited to, even though it's not really about regenerative materials, before that talk, I'm actually going to speak to the professor in charge of their set design and their costumes but rehearsal studios, because you and I probably had very similar experiences. I lived in the rehearsal studios in the basement of UCLA when I was an undergrad and for my degrees. And, just the thought of the acoustic paneling for the symphony
Yeah.
halls, for retrofits. I mean, that could be an area where you could spend the rest of your life helping to. Would you like to do that more? Would you like to see that more? And how easy would it be for these mainstream, beautiful musical organizations and performance halls to incorporate, as you say, just panels? What difference would that make for them?
Well, I'm sure I don't really feel qualified to answer that question. I think that would be really like a sound engineer or acoustical engineer probably could do that because it may not even necessarily be that you need to do the entire interior of a space. So, but where I went with that cheer is because as soon as you talk about doing hempcrete in an existing building, like as a retrofit, let's say everywhere, there are a lot of considerations that come into place. So that's where I think if I were going to pursue that, I would talk to like an engineer, an acoustical engineer, and just and see what their response was or where they would suggest to look first. Um,
Okay.
but if you were just doing your own house, if you were doing your own house, you could certainly.
Hmm.
It would not be hard at all. If I were doing it for myself as a sound studio in my house, I would leave the plaster off and then coat that interior with probably I use like an Elise paint to sort of see it just to provide a real highly permeable but coating on the material so that it sort of locks in because the lime, if you don't do that, it can kind of dust off a little bit and you don't want that in the air. So I just spray it with like a Elise paint, which is made from milk.
It's made from
Milk.
milk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a new one. So tell me a little bit about that. I don't
It's an
know
old,
these materials. This is exciting
okay.
for me to learn.
This paint is, I mean, that's what was used for me, I don't know when it started, but like all the original, many of the original paints were milk based, and then they would put additives in. But it's
Okay.
and you can make it overnight at home. You can buy it, but it's pretty expensive to buy, so I make it, and it's just like 4 gallons of milk and 2 quarts of white vinegar, and mix it all together and let it sit overnight and strain out the whey. It's kind of like making cheese, and you're left with the whey. I mean, you're left with the curd, which is almost pure protein. And then you wash that off and add a little bit of lime in it, um, and then
Wow.
thin it down with water to the consistency you want, and that's it.
That is so exciting
Yeah.
because I have a lot of friends. One of my girlfriends is upstate New York and she's a homesteader. She lives in a yurt. She's off the grid and she has a wonderful wellness center. So she's both high tech and homestead, which I love
Yeah.
that these materials give us the opportunity to go deep into science, material science, innovation, agri-tech, biotech, all of that,
Yeah.
and DIY. I'm a big fan of DIY shorts on YouTube, so I kind of want to play around with that one. That sounds
Yeah.
like
And
something.
you can do it. I mean, and you can add colorants to it, mineral colorants if you want. Yellow oxides and red iron oxide or whatever. Not whatever, but I always check your toxic. Don't use toxic things, right? Because
Yeah,
so
yeah, let's
I
let's
go to
not.
I go to our local like Potter Supply, and they've got a big selection, but you do have to be careful because some of the things that are there can be nasty.
What are your favorites then? If somebody did want to do, I know this is a complete tangent, but this is so much fun, and that's why I love these talks
Yeah,
because,
I live on the tangents, right? So,
yeah, sure. I mean, you're building them, but that's where, look, everything has to start from the invisible to the visible. That is
right,
how we all co-create. That's how we create everything. It's so whether we're, and I'm a big fan of what I call modern alchemy. It's merging ancient plant wisdom with breakthrough science. So the more we know, the more we share, the more we experiment, the more we innovate. And
right,
you're all about that. And you've been doing this for quite some time. So I truly do hold tremendous deference to you and your experience in this area. And that was fun. Now I really want to go to a pottery shop and play around with that. But when you, from a architectural perspective, then do people come and ask you to begin with? They already know that you've built a bunch of homes and designed, and you work
yeah.
with April McGill and Deep Root Designs and all of that. Are they expecting the information or are they surprised by the information when you first deliver just what materials you wish to use and why? Or are they seeking you out because you already have this reputation?
Probably mostly the latter, and often what sometimes people come with very fixed ideas about like the materials that they want to use in a building.
Hmm.
And my counsel at that point often is okay, but before we talk about materials, let's talk about what you're really trying to do. Because I find that there's a process of distillation in in as you work through a design.
Hmm.
And I had my previous business studio was called Alembic Studio, and Alembic, speaking of alchemy, was the original distillation retort used by alchemists because,
Really?
uh, and so in that way, Alembic to me kind of was both kind of a noun and a verb, in that it has to do with that one little primitive glass apparatus, and it means getting things down to their essential nature.
Oh,
So,
that's beautiful.
so the fixating to me or getting too focused or attached to particular materials or anything up front can be a hindrance to the process
Mm.
because if you pay attention and are open, and you move along through that process, then what needs to happen becomes apparent. Or maybe new things come up that you hadn't thought of before. And that's how I originally came across Hempcrete. I mean, when that happened, we were already in the middle of, and that was in 2008, I think.
Wow, that was, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, hempcrete was in its nascent forms back then, at least in
yeah,
this country, right?
yeah, in this country, right.
Mhm.
But we were involved in design development on what we were wanting to make like the most energy efficient, non-toxic building that we could in the country. Um, this was with my former partner, Clark Snell. And we were pretty well along. And Clark came into the office one day and said, I just heard about this stuff called hempcrete, and I think we should take a look at it because, it sounds really cool. And I said, okay, what is it? And he told me, and my initial reaction was like, oh no, we are so far along in this. And now you're going to throw this in here. However, I love Clark. He's a good guy. And so I said, okay, let's check it out. And we did. And I was pretty amazed. It's just because there were a number of issues that we were having that I'd really been struggling with. But I'm like, okay, well, that takes care of that and that and that and that. So, it
Oh, so
after,
what were the issues that it then resolved for you?
well,
I'm curious.
Okay, it had to do with we were originally we had set a standard of you of like the German passive house metric. There was not the U.S. hadn't really established their own passive house standards at that time, which is
For those who aren't familiar, I'm so sorry. Passive house
it's
standards.
okay.
Can you just,
Passive house was
yeah.
a energy certification program that
Mhm.
originated in Germany, and it's a pretty high spec to hit. I mean, but it's also as a metric, as a way to gauge your performance and measure it, and you know, it provided a lot of information and a framework with it that we could work with. So the problem was getting to their specifications in this country without the access to the same kind of materials
Mhm.
or at extreme cost. At that time, they become um, a lot easier to access now. But at that time, they were very difficult. And then also just the labor, the people that had the skills to be able to implement those materials because they were different.
Right.
And utilizing them, there were so many, I could just see there were so many
Mhm.
places for error where, one person comes in on a bad day and it
Mhm.
blows the whole thing out of the water because they forgot one little thing. So Hempcrete, we were casting, and as a monolithic form, for one thing, as a monolithic form, it solves a lot of, you don't have multiple drainage planes and layers and tapes and sheets of this and spaces for that. I mean, it's just a solid wall. And those walls were 16 inches thick because we were going for this really elevated standard. Um, so that was one thing. The monolithic nature of it was big because
Mhm.
that solves a number of problems. One is in air infiltration. I mean, there's still a lot of detailing, but not as much as you would in a typical house. Not having to use drainage planes or mesh for plaster, except, we do use plaster mesh around certain stress points.
Does that help create because it really is not, again, hempcrete is not structural in and of itself. It has to be within the container of whatever else you're working with
Right.
that you're filling, whether it's molds or blocks, casting or spraying in now. There are new technologies that arrive all the time, or maybe not all the time, but there are a couple different ways of utilizing it. So the mesh in this case was just for specific aspects of this project.
Well, like yeah, like for example, at the top of a window and door, or
Hmm.
where there are if when you have a square opening going through something, when you have a point like that right here,
Yeah.
you really need to put mesh here because this is just if you don't, it's like the lime plasters are a lot more forgiving than a Portland-based stucco, but it's like don't push your luck. It's so easy to put the mesh in there at these stress points, just like when you cut out a countertop for a sink to drop in,
Hmm.
you always round the corners because a sharp point on a counter is going to crack. So
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well,
it's
you
the same
have a
idea.
million pieces of tips and information about this. But what's so interesting is when you described this moments ago, I had a picture in my mind of a combination of a Fred Flintstone-esque era trying to utilize high-rise building techniques. That's like the German high standard passive building in an environment that was not really yet up to
Yeah.
speed. So wow, you really made it more difficult for yourself, but when you were in, you were all in, is what it sounds like to me, because you saw the benefits.
Yeah, it led to, that led to a number of other things within that particular project because we really did see it. I never thought of Fred Flintstone, but he's welcome to come. But
Well, you said wood and stone, and
yeah,
it just popped
yeah,
into me.
but we really saw that in a lot of these projects. It's really sort of like a marriage of natural building and like modern tech
Hmm.
because partly the building science, that's behind it, and also particularly when you get to a certain level of efficiency in your envelope, and then the way that you think about systems, all these systems that I was talking about before, like having a harmonious, interplay between all these things, how we think about those is different than with a typical building. For
Interesting. Yeah.
example, for example, I'm doing a project right now where, and this was true of, it's been true of some in the past too, where we really cannot get or it's, well, we could, but we'd have to get it from Germany and then have it rewired to work here,
Hmm.
getting like heat pumps and things that are small enough to work.
Hmm.
So, I mean, that might sound counterintuitive, but if
Yeah.
because I won't go into that. Anyway, it's been really, this has been a kind of amazing to me, and as I'm sitting here talking to you, I never thought I'd be here. When we got into this, it was really just because we had this one idea for this one project and we decided we were going to do it. And it made, we didn't know how we were going to pull it off, but we did with the help of so many people, So now to be sort of doing this or what I'm doing now, I just think, wow, this is so great.
How many years have you been doing this? Just so people have the context. I think
Just
30
with
plus
Hempcrete,
years, right?
with Hempcrete,
Mm-hmm.
no, just since 2008. But I mean,
2000. Oh, right.
I started doing residential design build back in the late 70s. And then I had, about a decade interlude there building custom sailboats, another decade after that of residential and commercial things. And anyway,
And you're still here. And actually, as you speak, I think of people that I'm so excited. I love being a bridge builder and connector. And, that's just my greatest joy is 30,000 foot view and puzzle pieces and saying, how can we all collaborate and where can this collaboration go? And it's just so exciting. I have a very dear friend who is a wonderful scientist, researcher, and she is in the area of biotech. And she is literally a consultant. She has started 7 biotech firms and she just loves to come in and build these beautiful things and CROs and then leave. But she's a sailor and she actually retrofit built her own boat
oh,
and
really?
made absolutely. And I'm thinking, oh, I have to connect you to. She's going to be a very significant, already has been for years, but we're working on some things. Let's just say it's taken a couple of years longer than we thought, but I'm thinking, oh, I have to introduce you to this wonderful person. And my there'll be an interview coming out with a lead certified analyst. A woman like you is way ahead of her time, and she's a feng shui master and now teaches courses to architects, builders, contractors to learn again modern alchemy using that ancient wisdom with where we need to be for our built environments. And so, oh, I can't wait to introduce you guys. So, just very exciting because once you get turned on to this, we stay turned on, tuned in, turned on, tapped in, kind of. That's to quote Abraham. That's
Yeah,
where we're going
yeah.
with this.
You didn't turn on, hang on.
Hang on, yeah, for dear life, sometimes it feels like, because it is not for the faint of heart to be involved with hempcrete, whether from the architect side to the building side to the materials innovation. It's still a tricky, a little bit of a wild west kind of industry. And you understand that because you helped to create building codes, which is really, again, for a lot of people I know that reach out to me through my company, EcoSynergy Solutions is here right now as a consultancy to help put people together in these systems and offer the systems and strategy, innovation, and thinking. But it's really fascinating to me that we have a fundamental, still needs to be addressed issue building codes. How did you do this? And what do you suggest others can do for when they say, we really want these materials in our commercial and residential builds?
Well, I'm not. Well, first, we do have the building code right now, Appendix BL, which was approved in for 2024, and I think that is a great tool for people to rely on. It provides prescriptive guidance for building. The hurdles we had to overcome prior to that were pretty significant, and so as you were saying, there are that was. As homeowners, builders, designers, architects, you had to be pretty dedicated to the project because it was, there was a whole, and there still is, there's another level of work and research and material acquisition and just things to think about and scheduling and that are uh, added on top of, let's say, your typical build. So having these things now in the code though really does at least remove one of those hurdles. And I think all of those items that I just mentioned have gotten easier over time. Material acquisition to me is like there's always people get very concerned about that, but it's everything that we need is there. You just have to know who to call. And
Right.
that's uh,
And I don't mean Ghostbusters, but
yeah,
that's
right.
funny. So, in your expertise, material acquisition is a stressor because we have hempitecture, we have Amerishal,
No,
we
no,
do
no, no, no,
have,
no, it's not. Yeah, it's not. It used
right.
to be. It used to be that
Uh,
the only place that we could get it was from overseas.
right.
So the first projects that were done here, by anyone, all of the hemp herd was coming from probably France or the Netherlands.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and then Canada came online, and then there have
Hmm.
been something concerns that have popped up, and some have stayed around the country, and some have passed enterprises for processing herd, and then the lime. Lime is the other. That's I think of that as like the magic ingredient. That kind of really makes it all work, and that has also evolved to where we now have domestic sources for lime that are suitable for herd or for to make hempcrete. So that's changed also. However, all that is really good and it's all really helpful, and it
Hmm.
has lowered the bar in terms of the things we have to get over.
Hmm.
And these are not things that typically you're going to find at your local builder's supply.
We have to change
So
that then. Is that the next hurdle for us in this industry? Because why aren't these standard Lowe's and Home Depots carrying the materials? I mean, these are.
volume, it's volume. I mean,
Mhm.
their model is to move a lot of product at a low markup, so or not a high markup. And I just don't think that right now there's enough volume of hempcrete buildings being the scale of things across the country doesn't really support that yet.
Hmm.
It may never, but it might.
I like to say that it will at some point because, or it's that we support the individual and direct to consumer avenues. That's really fine. I'm happy to really keep things under the control of those who are so passionate, have been doing this so diligently for so many
Yeah,
years, the smaller companies. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's yay, small companies,
yeah,
because it's the
yeah.
backbone of this
Oh,
whole.
me too. Now, I
Mhm.
mean, I feel the same way because the people that I work with, in the supply chain, I mean, we know each other. But the big thing, though, it has gotten better in so many ways. But the really, big consideration there is just accessibility, as i.e., like shipping and timing. So the timing is
Standard
actually not.
supply chain, standard logistics,
Yeah,
standard
yeah,
operational considerations, just as there would be for any GC, any architect. This is normal for the process of building
yeah, yeah.
a property, right?
It's just knowing you have to plan a little bit farther ahead, but it's not, again, it's not a big deal, just something to understand.
Going back to what you just said about the building codes, my understanding is there are still areas where it's just a matter of informing the inspectors, presenting the right information to get it approved in any region. Is it by region, by state? What's your experience? Because I do get calls from people not only all over this country, but actually globally now, interestingly enough, which is wonderful. And they want Eco Synergy to be a part of putting together the team for their whatever the project is, especially on a humanitarian basis. So, in your experience, you did get that passed for here. And so we have the code for North Carolina. Is that statewide? How does someone else begin this process in their state? Is it country level? I mean,
Okay. It varies state by state how that
mhm,
works. And I would say, again, the work that was done that was really first presented to the International Code Council in 2022
mhm.
was an effort of like primarily nine people, including Martin Hammer, David Eisenberg, and Kiko Tebod, and another half dozen people, and myself. But Martin and David really led that effort. They were amazing.
Yeah, so how do we
Yeah,
translate
okay,
that?
so
Because I knew it's here in North Carolina because I've had the opportunity now to talk to eco builders and you and some of my friends in the hemp side directly for hempwood and hempcrete. And we have more colleagues coming on. It's just so wonderful to have people want to participate in these conversations. But for someone in a different state, so how can we take what we did here? What should they reference, or how do they bring it to their community leaders and their builders to get this so that it's the entire United States? Because truthfully, if you've done it in one state, you can do it everywhere.
it makes it easier. Precedence is always good, and precedence within your own state is even better. So, for example, the first project that I did in Virginia, which was in 2014 or 15, there weren't any hempcrete buildings there then, but they wanted to know if there was, I said, well, we've got these in North Carolina, but they wanted to know about Virginia.
Mhm.
But there weren't any. So, we just had to satisfy them in other ways. But it's like, okay, I think that it varies state by state how that process, how you can officially get that on the books, how you can have the code adopted. For example, Texas does it regionally. The city of Austin last summer adopted Appendix BL, the city of Austin. That didn't mean that it was adopted by the entire state.
Only the city of Austin. So even Round Rock and the areas outside of Austin and
Right. Right.
huh.
Then, not too long after that, the state of Minnesota approved it. So now we're talking about the 2024 IRC, International Residential Code. And then, since then, I don't know if Virginia has adopted it now, but I've got a couple of projects currently underway in Virginia where we did a modified code modification request. So even if you're, and we'll get to the question of how the process of getting things adopted a little bit, although I certainly can't speak for every state, but just the fact that it's in there is code language.
Mm-hmm.
Even if your state hasn't approved it yet, it's not as good as approval, but it does give you something you can kind of lean into a little bit when you're talking to your building department. So as the general, as it's good practice,
Yeah.
and this goes for whatever you're building. Whatever you're building or with any materials. I think when you're getting into a project like that, any kind of construction project, is go and talk to your building officials. Find out who you need to talk to, get them on board, say, this is what I've got, this is where we're at. What kind of questions and concerns do you guys have?
Mm-hmm.
So this is different than getting involved at a policy level.
Right. It's a personal level. It's a project level.
This is getting a project on the ground, and establishing additional precedents that can be used for future projects, as everyone furthers the effort for other people as they build upon that. So getting your code officials on your team is really important.
Sounds like paramount importance, really. It does, to launching this
Yeah,
successfully.
because they know a lot, and
Yeah.
you need so finding out what there's typically an educational process there, if they've never seen it before, but most people can be a little skeptical, but I've seen this numerous times when if it's their first time, once they see it done, they're like, oh yeah, this is good. I get
I
it.
was about to ask you that. It seems to me, from what I've heard from you and others in these similar situations, they want a reason to say yes. People are excited to learn about what this is. You don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah.
once you see, is it really a hard leap for any of these officials to make? And how quickly do you think we can translate from the IRC, from the residential, over into commercial?
Well, I think there are some people working on that right now. I'm not involved in that effort at this point, but I don't really know how to answer that. The code, it's on a 3-year cycle.
Oh,
So it doesn't happen. Things don't happen real quickly. Although we got from 2022 to 2025 pretty quickly. That seemed like okay.
you're like, I blinked and there we're done. And oh, we're
Yeah,
starting all over again.
yeah, the commercial piece, I don't know. I know I used to get approached years ago. I mean, we're talking in the teens, early teens even,
Yeah.
by people wanting to do like commercial projects, hotels, specifically. I'm thinking that was like really interesting. It was a no, mostly because of the fire ratings. But there are.
But that's interesting, though, because the fire ratings should understand the mechanics of the materials. It is fire retardant. It is so much more highly sought after because
Yeah.
innately hempwood and hempcrete are fire retardant.
Yeah, but if you don't have the approved laboratory test results for
Mhm.
this country, to say here's this sheet from this laboratory that says the performance is X, Y, and Z, you cannot rely on anecdotal knowledge when you're dealing with this, and especially with fire. I mean, it's having sat through some of the ICC committee hearings around fire protection and the considerations and things that go into it. I have so much respect for them, and I mean, it's a lot of work to satisfy what they what they want to see, but it's life safety, and it's important. So, but
Absolutely.
without somebody that has put this through a battery of tests, it was impossible to say, they're not going to approve that, especially in a commercial building, especially where people are asleep, right? And that is in process, and I think that, but as far as a timeline for that, I really don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to do, I should have done deeper research before putting that question out there, but my understanding was that there have been tests. I'll have to look back and see, maybe it was our buddies over at Hempwood in Kentucky have reach
No,
certain
no. Americhandra did the E84 test, which is for flame
right.
spread and smoke, and then also the E119, which is just resistance of the wall assembly for a 1 hour rating.
Mhm.
And past both of those. I think the really cool thing about, I think, especially that E84 test is like it's like
Yeah.
zero flame spread, zero smoke.
That's amazing.
Is
Ugh,
anybody who, I mean, those are the two main things. The production of smoke is in a building is often as bad as, more people are damaged often by just the gases and things that are put off by modern
right.
products.
Absolutely. The off-gassing is of tremendous significance. And so let's talk just briefly about your now house 2.0. Is that
Oh, who told you about that? Yeah.
Well, you did the initial. There was a project that was. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, or for, as much as you wish, of course.
Well, that was the original Now House was the one that I referenced that had the 16-inch thick walls that we were doing to passive house standards, and that was a real, that was a dream that became reality miraculously, and it really, well, it had a lot of natural build elements, and as I said, married with some real high tech stuff.
Mhm.
Just the design was pretty high tech, and we had a mechanical engineer that joined us on that project who was really brilliant, who helped to crunch a lot of the, just the performance numbers. So that was a really out of the box project.
What made it so for you? Why?
Oh, well, we did that on a site in West Asheville and in an urban environment. It was meant to be sort of like a model for an urban, sort of like urban sustainability.
Mhm.
And a lot of the interior flooring, we made compressed earth blocks from the clay on site. We processed, from the excavation for the foundation, we processed that and made it into flooring and earth block walls for interior thermal mass as part of the energy strategy. We
Mhm.
processed that same clay for interior plasters, clay plasters.
Wow.
There were all of the wood was either reclaimed from some old barns around here. That all the doors were made from. I led some workshops in door making with some students, and that was made from reclaimed barn wood, but
Mhm.
that was like 150 years old, and we had to have it
Wow.
kiln dried and then done. And all the other wood that came out was done by horse logging. A lot of hemlock was used because we are dealing with hemlock blight here. So, trees that were already dying, they would go in with these horses and pull them out, and we had that milled up.
Did you use any hempwood
Things
in
like
that?
that. What's that?
Yeah, that those are a lot of my goodness. You remind me again of my friend upstate New York. She's helping to organize their big Homestead Expo, and I think this year's or next year's will be a lot more about with these building materials. Just it's fascinating stuff. It just really I could geek out on this all day. Did you incorporate hempwood in that? If not, in
I
the
don't think
2.0?
that I don't think they were around at the time.
We'll talk,
I could
but
be
that's
wrong.
my goal is to help get you connected to them. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing vertically integrated farm. That's my buddy, Gregory Wilson, who's the CEO of Fibonacci is his company, but makers of hempwood.
Really?
So,
Fibonacci? Okay. That's a clue.
incredible. Well, I'll send you the link to his episode, which I just posted, so you will learn a lot about him, but absolutely fantastic. So, yes, that's so 2.0, is that where are you in
Okay, yeah. Okay, so 2.0 is, well, I just decided to, I got involved with, these are the projects in Virginia that are underway. And I was approached by this person, I guess a while ago, and he started telling me what he wanted to do. And we went through probably a couple months of discussion really before we really sat down and say, okay, let's move this forward. And in the process of doing that, he really wanted to do something not necessarily to passive house standards, but he wanted no toxic materials, no foams, no pretty much all natural materials in the build.
Mhm.
So that was part of it. But then he also wanted like a pretty high level of energy performance, and not
Okay.
quite to passive house, but pretty high. And to do that, it's a pretty effective envelope in terms of, when you think about the house and just, the typical like this, and
Sure.
just that continuous insulation all around. So we're getting to use, for example, foam glass aggregate as like an under, we've thermally isolated the whole building with foam glass aggregate from the ground. And that was something, again, at the original Now House, we knew that was, you couldn't get it in this country, well, unless we wanted to have it shipped over from Europe. Shipping, that was a little
Yeah,
not
that
practical.
can run the price tag up a little bit.
Yeah. And then it's been an opportunity for me to really take a lot of the initial concepts in the Now House and really just take it up a couple of notches like this in
Mhm.
terms of refinement, in terms of execution, because we've learned a lot in the, in the however many years it's been, 15,
Yeah.
18 years
Yeah.
since that first project, both in the details, and I think back of how we, frankly, when I think back of how we did some of the things in the Now House, and we did it with guidance from somebody from England who had done this a lot. But I think, across the world, everybody's evolved their techniques, and so have we. So having an opportunity now to really make it better is really exciting, and
I love
I'm
that.
very excited about this because it's a real leap. It's not a huge leap, but it's a leap. Little things matter. So
Yes, they really do. They really do. And I feel that we keep making these little leaps, but they're really, if you look back even just the 15 years ago, it's a lifetime of difference. It's absolutely
yeah,
astronomical how
yeah,
far we've come in really relatively a short amount of time, considering the span that we have
considering,
been
yeah,
building and living in
yeah.
structures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Some people think, I think some folks wonder, like, what's taking so long? And it's like, well, you got to understand, we started from, like, in this country from zero, 15, or, not that long
Fred
ago.
Flintstone. I mean,
Yeah,
let's go
right.
back to the bedrock era, right? So no, we
Yeah,
we really have come a long way, baby, as Virginia Slims used to. I don't know why I keep that line keeps
it's
sticking in
okay.
my
It's
head. You know, I almost moved to Europe in the Asheville, Western North Carolina area, and that area was so severely affected by recent weather and those horrible storms. It's just unbelievable the resiliency of that region. And to think I almost moved up to Black Mountain. I love that area. It's just
really,
when I was first looking where I wanted to be based, although I think I'm not going to be based anywhere specifically. I'm going to just move around the world and first establish. My goal is to really create some, plug in a few holes to help these industries connect. And but
where, where,
I'm
where are
just
you right now physically? I mean, where are
oh,
you?
physically right now I am in the Piedmont Triad area. So I'm kind of right in the middle. I can a couple hours from here, an hour from there, and 3 hours from the coast. I have a
Right.
son who's in the Marines
Yeah.
and he's currently, well, he's deployed at this time, which is a lot to deal with and beautiful. I'm very proud of him, but he's on the coast when he's here on base and we shall see, but I have a daughter who just finished her master's from SCAD in Atlanta in sculpture. And so we're a very unusual little family, the three of us. And I keep moving close to stay near my children. When they left New York, I left New York. And I
Right.
was bouncing around trying to see where the opportunity lies. I think North Carolina is a very beautiful and unique place. It really is at the forefront of some things and very well poised for what it's about to do, thanks to leaders like you and inspirational people that I've met, existing colleagues in the hemp space, and my new friends. And I am really, really excited about where we're going to keep merging design, lifestyle, and human experience and enhance that. So, if you had one project that would be a dream project for yourself or for a client, what would that look like?
It would be a community. I mean, I have what brought me initially to Asheville was to build was a community build project that I was involved with, and this is like 30 plus years ago. But I think right now, probably in a urban or semi-urban environment, to do like a mixed use community.
Hmm.
Mixed retail, residential, and probably some kind of manufacturing, whatever that might look like, whether it's artist spaces or small scale production facilities, but just something that for me, this is something that for me ties into sustainability
Hmm.
is, I mean, when I was younger, as in like the late, very late 60s and early 70s, and the whole back to the land thing, and, going out and living in the woods and the mountains. And that was kind of, I thought at that time, that was my way to do something good for the world and not make such a big impact. And now, my views on that have shifted somewhat, along with a lot of other things. And so I think that community developments in an urban, semi-urban.
I love that. And I do think that I totally agree with you. And actually, I think we share, again, what a surprise. The more I learn about you, the more I'm like, oh, he speaks my language. We must be brother and sister from other mothers, because that is very much so part of why I'm here as well. And I think I'm more of a glamping gal, really, probably a little bit. I'm not one
All
to be
right.
outdoor in a tent as much as I love the romantic quality of that
Yeah.
vision. That's just not really my vibe. And I'd like to say otherwise, but I've tried it and Okay. But what I am seeing pop up all over the world are biophilic designs and a combination of neuro art and wellness hospitality. I find all the intersection of those disciplines and approaches growing and expanding globally. I mean, there are intentional communities, there are mixed use spaces now. There's one in Georgia somewhere, and there's one popping up here in North Carolina. That's actually how I first discovered you and all of your colleagues, April McGill, and was because I was showing another client who's building a closed loop ecosystem community. And I wanted to show this is what Hempcrete House looks like. That's how I stumbled upon and, well,
Mm,
truthfully was divinely guided and led to discovering all of you. So I
yeah.
think that you're spot on. I think that's absolutely. I got a call, I had one last week with a woman in the UK who wants me to come out there and help design 30 homes that she wants to put into a specific area. And so I guess my last question is, with your expertise and the fact that there are more and more and more of us having these conversations, do you think the future is in prefab, modeled, pick one of five homes, or do you think that every job is going to be unique? Of course, feng shui, blessing the land, being aware of our surroundings, all of that I think is important as well. So there will always have to be some variability to that.
Mhm.
But where do you really think the commerce is going to start to move? Is it going to be that? Because I'm seeing more modular units, pre-buy them, but those are
Mhm.
still made with some materials that are just not the right. Just because you can take a container and an old train car and turn it into something, we can do that, but we still are best served if we utilize these materials. So, where would you like to see convenience meeting commerce meeting the beautiful vision for what you and I just described?
I think the answer to that lies in like having, if when you're starting to look at a project and putting together a team of players and things, is to really approach it with like a very open mind to how it might best be approached in the same way that I told you I often counsel people put those material attachments to the side
Mm,
because the methods just to bring it down just to the hempcrete component, looking at the methods that are available to us, whether it's panelized or sprayed or block or cast in place,
yeah,
um, they all have a place. Every one of those has a place. And so I think to me those are tools, methods, or colors on a palette, so to speak, where understand the needs of the project, then look at what the options are to get from A to B. Getting attached and saying panels are the best in some places, probably, but that doesn't mean you should use them on your project. So you can do different wall types. It doesn't have to be depending on what's going on in the space or how it's being used or what the terrain is like and what the foundational, there are all kinds of considerations. Or you might decide to do one type of thing here and another thing here in the
right.
same building. It can complicate things a little bit when you change up wall types, that have to intersect. But at the same time, I think, there's no forced consistency to me. It's like looking at what's really the best thing that we can do here.
I love that. That's the best question of all. And honestly, probably where we'll, oh my gosh, I want to do a whole other segment with you, but I know that we will be doing some more shooting actually on site, Hempcrete House. I'm very, very excited to continue our new friendship, our collaboration, sharing this vision, bringing it to other people. I am so grateful for your time and your expertise and truthfully just your joy. That's really why we want to do all of this. What more can I become? What more can we offer for humanity's sake? So thank you so very much for joining me today. And I will, of course, ask people to like, subscribe, share this interview, and we will have your contact information in the box below. And for anyone who wants to work with Eco Synergy, I'm going to set you up with Hempwood. Make sure that you are now connected to them. You will love that company. So thank you very much for joining me today. And thank you for those who are watching this episode. Thank you for being you.
All right. Well, thank you, Shara. Thank you for having me.